Jimmy Steinfeldt, world-famous rock and roll photographer and Eagle Scout, live from Los Angeles. Hey, Jimmy, good morning.
Good morning to you, Phil.
And we talked to you last time in the release of your first book, Rock and Roll Lens, and now you're on to Volume 2. What's the difference between Volume 1 and Volume 2, Jimmy?
There's two major differences. The new book is all black and white photography, classic-looking black and white rock and roll photography. And the other big difference is, in my first book, I wrote all the stories, 50 stories to go with 50 different famous people I photographed. This time, I called all my friends in show business, and I said, hey, do you have a story about one of these famous people I photographed? So the book is 50 black and white photographs that I took and 50 different stories by famous people in show business, and I can tell you a little bit about them as we go along.
Yeah, give me a little teaser on one of the better stories you've got in this book.
Absolutely. Okay, here's one of my favorites. We all know about Steve Jones of the Sex Pistols, the great guitar player. So he wrote this story about Billy Idol. And think of it in a British accent.
Okay.
Billy Idol is a true artist. I've known him since I was 20. He was one of the few people that was around when the Sex Pistols first started. He was ahead of the game before most punks came on the scene. I love Billy Idol. I played on a bunch of his songs, and it was always fun going into the studio with him. And then there's one more I'll tell. It's a funny story. Are you ready?
You bet.
This is by Owen Husney, the original manager for Prince, helped Prince get his first record deal and managed Prince for many years. But Owen tells a story about Joe Cocker. I was the co-promoter of the Joe Cocker Show at the Met Sports Center in Bloomington, Minnesota. It was at the height of Joe Cocker's fame. The opening act was Dr. Hook. Dr. Hook played about 3 songs and then said to the crowd, "What do you want to hear?" And 22,000 people yelled, "Joe Cocker!"
Crushed ego.
That's correct. So Owen had to shrink back to the stage. He was so embarrassed. Well, the life as a concert promoter can be embarrassing.
You know, it's funny about Joe Cocker when you bring up him. The first thing that comes to my mind, I think it's a lot of other people as well, is John Belushi impersonating Joe Cocker.
That's right. Can I tell you quickly some of the other famous people who are pictured in the book?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, of course, on the cover we have Angus Young of AC/DC, and also included in the book are Springsteen, Fiona Apple, Green Day, Ice-T, Willie Nelson, Ringo Starr, Iggy Pop, Neil Young, and a total of 50 famous, legendary rock and roll artists, country artists, all kinds of different music that I photographed. And the book's only $19.95.
Now, that's a nice buy, too, because if you're a rock and roll fan and a music fan, I know your first book, Rock and Roll Lens, was exceptional, and I have no doubt this is much of the same. And in the past year, you know, we've had a few of our favorite stars pass away, not the least of which, of course, is in this part of the country, Prince. Did you have any personal interaction with Prince?
I sure did. The first time I met Prince was at, of all things, Rudolph's Barbecue in Minneapolis. And I was having lunch there, and he was sitting with Apollonia just a few feet away from me. And when I finished my meal, I turned to Prince and I said, Prince, I've had the pleasure of photographing you recently in concert, and I'd like to get those photographs to you. What's the best way? And, of course, he was a man of very few words.
Yeah.
So he said, you can send them to my management. And then I said, well, where's that? And he said, it's on the back of all my album covers.
Okay.
So that was my famous story. But I got to photograph him about a dozen times, because I lived in Minneapolis for all those years, and I would photograph him for Rolling Stone magazine and so on. In my first book, Rock and Roll Lens, you know, it's all color photography, and both Prince are in that book, the very first time I photographed him around the time of Purple Rain, and also David Bowie, who passed away recently, about a year ago, is in that book. And frankly, the new book and the old book are both available at jimmysteinfeldt.com.
And why did you decide to go black and white in this book, Jimmy?
Really, it was an artistic statement more than anything else. I think most artists try to change with each project that they do, and so a very obvious change would be to do black and white this time around as opposed to my color photography, and then getting this idea to interview, people in show business. For instance, Lou Gossett Jr., the Academy Award-winning actor, wrote one of the stories in my new book. He wrote the story about his close friend, Richie Havens, the great folk singer.
And if you want to meet Jimmy Steinfeldt and talk some rock and roll with him, you're going to be making an appearance in June in Minneapolis.
That's correct, Saturday, June 3rd. And if people want to get details on the time and the exact address, they can go to a special website called jimmypicture.com.
That's jimmypicture.com. And where's that going to be again, Jimmy?
That's going to be in Minneapolis at the Jimmy Wilson Gallery. Kind of funny. My name's Jimmy Steinfeldt, and my friend Jimmy Wilson has a fantastic fine art gallery, and he's doing the exhibit. And the exhibit's going to run for 2 months, all of June and all of July, and I'm going to be there in person on June 3rd.
So if someone wants to pick up a copy of the book, a great chance to get it signed.
Absolutely. They can come to the exhibit, and I'll sign it on June 3rd. And they can go to my website, jimmysteinfeldt.com, if they can't be there in person, and I'll ship them a signed copy.
And not only that, again, that website for the appearance, Jimmy?
jimmypicture.com.
jimmypicture.com. Jimmy Steinfeldt. Check out his work, and you can do that at his website, and his book is available in many better bookstores as well. And again, he'll be in Minneapolis on June 3rd. Jimmy, thanks again for your time. Always fun to talk with you, and let's stay in touch.
I look forward to it. Thanks, Phil.